Are you a leader in customer success, pre-sales, professional services, support? Do you work behind the scenes and roll up your sleeves to make sure that customers are happy? Renew. Then this is for you. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Getting it done. Services, success, and software. We'll talk with the pros that have been in the trenches, getting service teams off the ground, launching new types of groups to service customers, or running agencies that don't have a product attached to it. For the pros, by the pros. This is the GSD Podcast, and this is your host, Jeff Kushmerek.
All right, it says I'm recording. So, Anita, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jeff. How are you?
Good. Can you guess how many beverages containers are on my desk right now?
No, let's do like 6. Let's say 6.
Three. No, that's
Okay,
good.
that's
But you know
bad.
what? It's been, when I had the desk with like the L on it, like, yeah, we definitely had, anybody that worked with me would know that was a fun game that would get them like a free lunch if they answered right. So
Nice. I guess I don't get a free lunch then.
no free lunch. But so we talked a few days ago and I was like, oh my God, I have to get you on. Why can't we do this today? But you're a busy person. So we're doing it now, which is awesome. And I really love how you're positioning yourself because, and I'll let you explain what that is, but the whole, like, if you're going to do something, do it well and be hyper focused and super niche, like you're doing all of that. So I'd love for you to say what that is and then talk about, in 5 minutes, sort of that road on how you got there. And then we can just talk about customers and how much they love us and stuff. So.
All right. Yeah, sounds great. So I call myself a CCC, which is a Chief Churn Crusher.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Anybody who comes from SaaS background in particular, but most businesses will use the term churn.
Right.
So the history of this, quickly, I worked for 14 years as a research coordinator in a university research institute. I am trained as a qualitative researcher, which means basically ask a lot of questions. You take your data, you crunch it, and then you make recommendations based on the data you collected.
That's right.
So worked there for 14 years, was laid off, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Facebook ads were really coming up at the time.
That's right.
So
Yes.
yeah, and it was hot. Like you could.
No, there was a bunch of companies here in Boston that's what they did, and they made. All I can say is like now they're subletting their offices out, and they've got like 2 employees left. So
yeah. But 4 years ago, 4.5, almost 5 years ago now, it was really hot. They were really new. Nobody, it was great to just jump in there. So I got into digital marketing, fell in love with it, but I just felt like I have kids of my own. And I remember that toddler stage where you just had to watch them constantly because they'd be into stuff. Well, back then, that's what it was like having a Facebook ad agency. They didn't have limits. You could just, you would pop in 2 days later and suddenly like.
We spent the whole thing on what? Like, yeah, exactly.
Oh, it was insane. Like it would just all of a sudden skyrocket in your cost per view or click or whatever you were measuring. Yep. So I just couldn't take it as what it was. And I just felt like there's got to be a better way. So I closed the agency and decided to jump into consulting using those qualitative research skills.
Okay.
And really a lot of stuff around customer profile, really getting to know the customer.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I didn't have product market fit, and I was going after coaches and consultants. It was like I knew I had hit my bottom when I was almost desperately begging someone whose business was failing to hire me. And I was like, no, this is ridiculous. There's got to be somewhere else where they really will value this skill set I have. And around that time, I had partnered with someone, and ironically enough, he has a PhD in qualitative research methods, so he does surveys. and we were looking to create a survey app.
Okay.
And we started on all of that. And I wanted to know what was one of the big things that SaaS companies faced, because I'm always curious what's coming down the road at me. I want to just research and get a sense. And that's what led me to churn. And when I had that moment of desperation talking to this woman and trying to beg her to hire me, I was like, this is nuts. So what I did is I closed down that business, and I realized my skill set really applied well with churn and SaaS companies. And that's how I niched down. And that, inflection point,
sure,
have product market fit.
That's awesome.
And boom, within 6 weeks of making the change, that was it. Got my first three clients.
That's awesome. So, it's so funny because I think this is probably a non-segue, or non-sequitur, but like it's stuck in my head. So I want to ask you now, when we started talking about the SaaS companies, do you know, because if you don't, it's totally fine, we can move on from it. Was there did people recognize churn as a problem before SaaS? Because I don't remember it as much. Like I remember we had a referenceability, but I don't remember churn, but I might not have been involved in that side of the business as much before. So I don't know if you bumped into that in your research or not.
It's kind of gone through different names. I've heard customer retention, customer attrition.
Right. Attrition was a big number. Yeah.
As well, right? So I think what's happened is, and I'm not quite sure where it happened, but the SaaS community adopted churn as their particular way of describing when customers leave their business.
Yeah. It makes sense because back in the day, you had to install things. It was a huge pain in the ass, right? Like, you spend a whole bunch of money on implementation and everything. With SaaS, it's like credit card info, log in, start using the stuff. So if you don't like it, you just stop using it, right? And move on to the next. Absolutely. So,
yeah.
So funny because, as we discussed, I know you get pulled into these situations where people think it's a personnel problem, right? I know you're laughing because we went over this for a long time. And people are like, that's it. Like, my success leader is the worst. I need you to go in and figure out like what X, Y, and Z is going. And is that the typical situation that you get pulled into? Is that the conversation that happens? Like, can you figure out why we're churning so much? Or
so there's usually three different things that when I'm speaking with SaaS founders or CEOs, that they come to me about. One is great product, great growth, but they're just not happy about the churn rate that they currently have, and they want to reduce it.
Yeah.
The second is that they have a great team.
Yeah.
But they're reluctant to implement some big churn reducing measures because they don't know how it's going to affect the team. The other part is whether the team will buy into it or not.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Wow.
And then,
so you'd be afraid to put in the thing that would fix the problem because you don't know how the team would feel about it?
Yeah. And it's
You'd think in this cutthroat day of like valuations and stock, people would be like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
So that is a smaller percentage, significantly.
I can see it.
So
I actually have been in the room when those conversations have happened, but people are like, we'll manage through it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it all depends on the type of business you have and that relationship with your team. So some of them have been afraid because, and we can get into this, when you're going to reduce churn, it is a company-wide effort.
Right.
It is not just one thing and you flip that switch and suddenly churn reduces. And that's really where that fear is coming from, is how wide is this going to be? How big is this going to be? And can I get everybody on board?
Right.
So that really depends on the culture of the company. Yeah. The last thing is they've done their research and they know, like, there's no simple solution to reducing churn, and they have no idea where to start. And if they start on their own, will the measures that they take actually work? So those are the three scenarios. The most common is they're growing well, things are going okay, they just don't like that high churn rate, they want to bring it down. And then the third one, which is they've done their research and they're overwhelmed and they don't know where to start.
What's because I'm not aware, what's the current industry standard that people are trying to hold to for churn rate? or retention rate, whatever you want.
Typically, like 5% is still pretty high. That
Okay.
means, every half year you're losing all of those customers and have to replenish them.
Right.
So the standard, most are trying to get around 2%.
Okay.
If you can, I mean,
I can see that in enterprise. For more of the sign up for 500 with your credit card, I can see there being a lot higher churn rate. But enterprise, I can see you don't want higher than 5%. So
well, and even with enterprise, the advantage is then, because there's often other products, you upsell, cross-sell, you can get into net negative churn, which is really where that would be awesome. But that's mostly because of expansion revenue.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the smaller SaaS, they don't have that ability to upsell and cross-sell in the same way. So you're right. There is a difference between the smaller ones and enterprise.
Sure. So when you get brought in, who are you typically working with the most? Is it the CEOs? Is it the success person? Is it marketing?
It is usually the founder.
Oh, no kidding.
It is. Yeah. Usually the founder finds me.
Wow.
And brings me in, and then
this is almost like internal affair thing, right? Do they people who's that? Oh, don't worry about it. And then you're the consultant in the room asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, well, that's what it feels like. But typically what I do is sit down with the founder and work with them first. I've got to really get a good understanding. And again, you wouldn't think this, but what is it like to be a customer and that customer experience? I want to have a really good idea of what they're dealing with. And then the second is the culture and how systems work. How does this company actually flow in terms, for me, of the data? I want to see, are they sharing, or are they really siloed? Right. And that is really what I come in and do. And it's kind of strange because I can't lead with that to say that's how I'm because they'd be like, what does that have to do with churn? And it's like, well, it's kind of everything.
Right.
But the easiest way for me to come in is look at the customer experience and the customer journey and see where are the biggest opportunities. I focus there first, then the longer term. So we might get the churn down 5% within, first 90 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all depends,
with some
right?
Simple thing, well, depend what the source of the churn is, right? Because
you've got it. So if it's delinquent churn, they've got these credit cards that they're just failing to process. Hey, that's an easy win, and not everybody knows to put in and you can put in an entire process to get delinquent churn.
Oh, there's the Canadian. Everybody, we've got a Canadian on.
Oh, did it pop out? Did I say A?
You said process, which is always the tell.
Oh,
don't worry about it. We love our 51st state up north, so it's great. So it's funny. I've seen this so much, and you highlighted it. Everybody thinks it's like, oh, we've got to get our 90-day launch down to 60 days, right? And so if you were to say, you had three, because you're the research and the quantitative person, what are the three usual things what are just the usual buckets of things that are the fast wins that you said, within the 90 days, here's some things that if we do that, we'll immediately kind of turn this turnaround, but then maybe there's some other longer term things that we got to dive into.
Yeah. And there actually is. And that's how, if I work with a company, we have a 90-day engagement, and then we have a 12-month engagement exactly for that scenario.
Yeah.
Because the longer term stuff focuses more on building the right information systems, getting the teams on board. This is what you talk about, that culture piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's the longer term. The shorter term tends to be around things like delinquent churn, bringing one of the favorites that people don't really look at is grandfathered customers.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
they were like our first people. They trusted in us. And
but they're only paying. I had one client just recently tell me paying 1/10.
Oh, yeah.
1/10 the amount.
Right.
So that's great. And there's a process for that. You don't just, wake up one day and decide, all right, we're just going to, bring you all up to current rates. There's a way to do that, nurture it. But that's often a big pot of money sitting right there.
Wow.
That isn't necessarily churn per se, but hey, when I point that out and they see that there's a big chunk of money that they can recover, let me tell you, they're usually very happy about it.
Yep.
And then the third is usually somewhere in the onboarding experience.
Okay.
So so this is what I do. I always sign up as a customer. Okay. I want to see what the experience is like. I don't want them to tell me. I want to see it from the user's perspective.
Okay.
And so there's usually something in there that we can focus on right away that will turn things around.
Oh, interesting. That's great. So maybe in some of the longer term things, because when we were talking previously, we talked about the, hey, maybe there are a lot of end of the quarter really crappy deals that, they don't really need everything that we do. And does that happen a lot, or am I just sort of overgeneralizing some things that have happened to me in the past?
I haven't really had that yet. Again, so it's so tough because they're all so custom.
Yeah.
But the bigger things for me are getting the proper information flow. So again, coming from qualitative research, this is that the customer profiles that are developed, and there's usually 2 or 3 customer profiles per product, not just, overall for the company.
Right.
And it's getting marketing, sales, customer success all involved, and customer support in the process of creating that. Right. And the better you can get everyone on the same page and focusing on those customer profiles, the more you can share the information. So that means marketing suddenly has a much better understanding of the challenges, the pain points, and how to, what hooks might work to bring those leads in. Sales, they talk to these people all the time, but often don't pass on the the real information, like the real pain points, the real challenges. The other thing is the goals.
Right.
So why are
they using the
you
product?
buying this?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting them, a customer support is the easiest because people are contacting them. They have a problem. They, push it out to product, but they tend not to push it out to marketing and sales and say, hey, you guys are saying this, but this, people are coming on my end and saying, this is not what is actually happening.
Right.
Maybe we need to change some of those angles.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is what I do. And this is why that buy-in becomes a bit of a challenge, because you're now dealing with culture. You're dealing with their processes. This is our sales process. Right. No, we don't deal with them, whatever it might be. And for me, it's all based on the flow of data. I want to see that data flowing throughout the entire company, so the entire company feels that they are participating and focusing on the most important thing, which is actually the customer.
Right. No, 100%. Do you ever turn down customers?
Yes.
And what are some reasons? That this is always the fun stuff. What are some of the reasons, besides crazy founder, because they're all crazy, but yeah.
I have actually, I'll tell you, Jeff, I've had wonderful experiences with the clients I take on. Yep. The first is if they don't respect me as someone who knows what I'm doing. Okay. If I get any sort of pushback or argument from the start or they're blaming the economy, this, that, competitors, whatever, we're done. We're not going to go any further, because I need you to be open-minded, because look what I'm actually suggesting. Right. The churn is a company-wide issue and needs to be addressed right through the company. If they're already closed-minded to this, they're not going to accept that as a solution.
Yeah, they'll take the report and then move along.
Yeah.
What is some standard, I said report, but it's probably a lot more involved in that. What sort of deliverables, or how do you sort of present your changes? Is it more of an iterative, let's try this every week? Or is it more of a, I've done my report and here you go, it's bound nicely in a 3-ring binder? Or
no, that's not me. No, I really,
I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not me. I really care about my clients, and I want my success is their success. So it is iterative. We go through, we talk about, all right, let's try this. And then they need to report back to me on what's happened. Sure. What was the outcome? What challenges did you face going through it? And then the other part, what was easy? Because that again informs me about that cultural piece, and maybe I can use that information then moving forward when I suggest something bigger once we get into that, longer 12-month engagement.
Oh, sure.
Because that's actually where it gets more challenging.
Yeah.
Now you're really pushing those things forward. And I got to see, all right, how does this company work that I can then leverage those wins? So I go throughout, and that means sometimes they email me in between our meetings and say, this is what I'm dealing with. Okay, great. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. So what was I was thinking about tools and trends and some things to get into. I've been asked a lot recently, should we put this system in? And I think what's going on, and I don't want to get pigeonholed in this, is that a lot of people do think that if they put in this customer analytic tool, that it's going to solve all of their issues. But are you seeing that? She's shaking her head. So do those things help? Because I have heard from people that are like, this, I'm not going to say the names of the products, we all know who they are, is amazing and this and that. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you called your customer up every other week and you kind of get some of the same answers, but I don't know. So why don't you give me your perspective on some of these tools that are out there and why you're shaking your head so vigorously? So.
Okay, one sentence. They will tell you the what, they don't tell you the why.
Oh.
Full stop.
You still have to go say, like, how come you're not using our product? I just see that you're not using it.
Yeah. So, and I fully encourage anybody to start, because you've got to start tracking somehow. And those hard metrics they will highlight some areas where you're like, hey, why did we have a huge drop off right here?
Yeah.
What can we do about it? But you still have to go and speak with the customer and find out why.
Right.
Why did they go from active to inactive? Right.
Yep.
And so that's what I do. Let's start finding out why. And it's weird because we like to converse with people. Mm-hmm. We all do, like humans are social beings, but yet this process of actually going and asking those questions, and they need to be structured for one, and there's an order to them. And third, they've got to be done with, I like to call it like a curious spirit.
Sure.
Instead of going in and saying, all right, so like you were active here, now you're inactive, and what happened?
Yeah.
Well,
why are you so broken? No.
But,
pretty much, but that's the approach.
Right?
But you're doing it, so it actually might be welcomed and received more that you're doing it. I'm assuming you're saying you're consulting to the company, like you've been asked to help. Because I feel like people are going to be more open with you on user surveys and journeys. We do that sometimes with our UX work. Somebody says, hey, we want to build X. And we're like, can we talk to some customers? And yeah, you get everything. And you hear like, they said, and then like they start talking about the other company. And
yeah. You know what though? I've put this on, I think it's still on my LinkedIn site. Bill Gates has one of the best quotes on this, and it is, your greatest source of learning is your unhappy customers.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I am shocked with how little the product management teams I've worked with value that, right? And, you hear stupid customer and this and that. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, you just, like, like, no, we designed this and did this in the right way. But then I'm like, it's kind of, listen, the customers don't like it, or they don't like the onboarding experience or this and that. Like, well, we'll put a walk me, everything will be fine. I'm just like, oh.
But do you know what it is? And we all come from our own perspective.
Right.
Right. And so the lens, I get it.
The
lens of the developer is, well, this makes logical sense because we're going from here to here to here to here to here.
Right.
But as the user, your end goal might be vastly different from that.
Right.
And there's your misalignment right there. So then you've got people calling support. They're not happy. They become inactive because what has actually been developed is not aligned with what they are trying to do. And they're thinking, there's been some great software I've been so excited about, and I sign up and I am so confused.
Yeah.
And I like to think I'm fairly intelligent.
Yeah.
And I'm so confused that I'm like, I don't even know what to do here. Right. And so I churn. I become inactive, and then I quickly churn. And that's usually in that trial phase.
Sure. Oh no. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because again, your churn can be measured in many different ways. And that's one of the key ones is where are they churning in that trial phase versus paid customer, right?
Sure.
So, using WalkMe, wonderful, but that's not enough.
Right.
If you are not aligning the actual product to what they are trying to accomplish, you're always going to have this. And then it's just, well, we'll add this and then we'll change this and you got to go ask them. Often, you know who has that info? Is the sales team.
Oh, yeah.
As they're talking to them.
Yeah.
And these are trained professionals who can listen to what people are saying and pull out, oh, you're telling me you want to do this, but really once they have the conversation, they find out it's 3 levels deeper and they're actually trying to accomplish that.
Right. Yeah.
And this is why you got to have those conversations, because I'll tell you like, oh yeah, I just want this to be faster. Whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Yep.
And then you and I talk back and forth and you realize, you know what, I want it to be faster because I want it to then lead to this next step. Right. And it is frustrating me because I can't get to that next step that this faster piece was supposed to help me.
I'm just laughing because I was going through that over the last 24 hours. And I'm just like, how come I can't hit the enter button? And there's nothing that's showing me like, oh, you haven't clicked the checkbox. I'm like, look, it's not 2006 anymore. Like if a user form's missing an entry thing, show them in a nice red. Oh my God, it just drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah. So it's digging out that stuff, which means you're going to hear, and I think this is where that fear comes in.
Yeah.
You're going to hear that something you've worked so hard on for so long,
right,
maybe is headed the wrong direction.
Right.
And you might have to turf it.
It's like, it's like why I hate reviews. Like, can you just tell me, like, just tell me it was good or bad. Like, I don't want to hear the examples. I don't want to hear like, yes, I know I lost my temper. Like,
yeah, because it's so hard, right?
Yep.
To get that. But this is why I really, and this is now when I become a coach, yep, you know, put on my little coaching hat, is to try to change the mindset from one of like, I don't want to hear it or I don't want to know, to let's be curious and use that Bill Gates quote that your unhappiest customers are your greatest source of learning. If you can flip that and just see it, wow, like it is going to solve so many issues that you've been struggling with, because now you're actually hearing what the customer's been trying to say through their support calls and their inactivity. You're now actually, you're not guessing, you're hearing it.
Yeah. How, you know, I'm going to say a concept that I think is awesome, but you can feel free to say, no, it's total bullshit, which is the customer advisory board. Like, do you find, total bullshit. Okay. So like, I don't know. So I have found, well, let's get into this a little bit, because I can tell you where it was super helpful, but like, what's your experience with the cab? And why it might not be the panacea that I think it is. So,
for some, it's so tough. It's such a, like, it's such
Mike Pence did the same exact sigh when he was asked something the other day.
Yeah, it's such a big question, and you don't want it. Like, it has value. There's no doubt, but I think it has value at different stages. When you are, you know, really growing quickly, that can be really helpful, because again, you're getting really good feedback and all of that. I think where it becomes problematic is where it becomes just a legacy thing, where it's not really adding value anymore. Gotcha. So twice a year, we'll have this event, we'll bring them together and talk. Or, and this is where I see you got to really be on it. Your customer profile is not static, or customer profiles are not static. Things are always changing. And what ends up happening with any board I've seen, if you have people that sit on it for a very long time, they don't bring a new perspective. They just bring the same perspective they've always had. And that's where it becomes a real issue.
Well, it's funny. And when I started bringing up, suddenly the memory of the last one that I was part of started popping into my head, which is like, oh, we had these massive enterprise companies that just pretty much dictated our roadmap. And if we didn't build that stuff, they were going to threaten to move to the next people. And then there was this wave of like, well, we should bring on X, Y, and Z and get rid of those people, because they just keep wanting the same thing, which we're not going to build unless we charge them like some NRE multi-million-dollar thing to go build them that one feature or something like that. So, You good? I know that there was a coughing in the background. So
yeah, sorry
no,
about that.
it's you can hear my voice. I've been talking straight for like 36 hours now, so I sound like I just smoked some Camel Unfiltered or something.
Yeah.
So
So going back to that, if that's what's happening, then that means that customer advisory board is ineffective.
Yeah.
And it needs to change. And whoever the facilitator is needs to then get a better grip in terms of really defining what the board is for. Sure. And if the board is to just push forward, those companies and what they want, then that's an ineffective board. And I would say it's actually detrimental then to your business. It is not helping in any way. Yeah. A really good board would try to serve the entire community. So that means all of your customer groups. And it's, it takes work. Yeah. It's hit and miss. Yep. It is not like, oh, wow. Like you can be very fortunate and get the right people on. But again, it's not just a one and done.
Right.
Things are changing. Market's changing. Yep. Right. You've got to be able to rotate people in and out of those positions. And that's what I noticed even at the university when we would have some of our board members who stayed on for 6, 7, 8 years. They never brought anything new to the table.
You're like, oh, now's the time where you're going to talk about that thing again. Exactly. I'm going to switch directions here, again, non-scripted. And it's been a thread on a couple, every time I talk with success people, churn, not as much. So I just might wanted to see if there's anything in the data that you've seen. There's a lot of, there's no standardization on who owns the customer and owns the customer relationship. And sometimes when I get down to it, I'm like, oh no, we're the CSMs, we own it. I'm like, okay, let me ask you a question. There's an upsell, who gets the commission? And they're like, oh, the CSM gets it. I'm like, okay. There's a renewal, who gets the upsell? And they're like, the rep. And I'm like, So have you seen, and if there's nothing, then it's not a problem. Is there any correlation between higher success rates and who owns that relationship? The renewals and the upsells and all of that. So I will tell you, my friends that have not wanted to take part in the monetary aspects of things, which wind up being a cost center to the company, they eventually wish they were doing upsells, but they do really hold on to the idea like, well, that really distorts our relationship with the customer, which I get. It's kind of like, hey, we have this really cool conversation. Now I'm going to hit stop and I'm going to be like, hey, Anita, by the way, I wanted to charge you $5 the next time we talk, and continually on ever since then. So have you bumped into this in your travels?
I really don't focus on a lot of that. So
I will tell you, it's funny because that's where, when I talk about people having their problems, they're really lasered in on that, which is interesting. So
yeah, no, like, and it's I haven't bumped across it yet, but I'm also not looking for it.
Okay.
It's not really, I try not to get into that aspect because again, for me, it's more about the data flow rather than revenue flow.
So it sounds like a hammer and a nail situation. That's because everybody's thinking that's what the issue is.
Yeah. And for me, again, I come from qualitative research. The data flow for me is far more important than the revenue. And I turn that over to other people because it's not, and however they structure that, because it's not my area of expertise.
Interesting. I'll just bring this up then. I'll get your opinion on it because I've been in the room, very contentious rooms at that, where somebody like the CFO will say, oh, sorry, let me edit it for public consumption here. Well, if the CSMs were given some commission or some upsell money, they'd take better care of their customers and they'd be more engaged with them. I'm like, oh, okay. Interesting perspective. Everybody's money driven, not so much, but so that's kind of, so people think that's the thing, and they will now move they will get less churn and better. I just remember what I said in that conversation. They'll get less churn if they focus more on their customers, if they know that they're going to get some coin out of the deal. And I'm kind of like, maybe not give them 41 customers to look after. So.
Yeah. It's again, part of what I do. I'm
Yeah.
a consultant, but I'm also kind of have to put on a coach hat once
Yeah.
in a while and try to get them to see that maybe that's not the best perspective. And
Right.
that,
But more comes from the data for you, where it's like customers weren't happy. Well, why are they unhappy? They never hear from their CSMs. Well, how come they never do that? Like, well, let's take a look. They manage 50 customers. There's 8 hours in a day. Right?
and all I can do is make suggestions and
Right.
recommendations, but it's up to them what they choose to implement. And I may or may not agree with it, but at the end of the day, I'm there to support them.
Right.
So again, in getting into that longer engagement period, the more I get to know them, the more I know how to approach suggesting some of these things that I may have brought up in the beginning that, they weren't interested in. How can I gently guide them?
Yep.
That, suddenly this might be a good idea.
Sure.
And really so I'm not a one and done consultant here,
No, I really like, because what I'm hearing is that you don't have, I've worked with marketing people that they come in and they're like, this is my system. I did it at Coke. I did it at Gillette. We're doing it here. I'm like, yeah, we're a startup. Those are monopolies. Like, that's not going to work here. But what you're walking in with sort of like, I'm going to look at the data and then come up with some, you might, I'm guessing, have some general consumption, but you've gone through the product. So you've used that to base here. So I'm hearing clean slate, come in, compile data, and then work iteratively back on some suggestions to improve. Some reduce things pretty fast, and then there's like, okay, now, I fixed the sink, but let's talk about your foundation now. Right?
And that's what I was going to say. Now the real work begins. And that's why, it's building on the momentum of those first 90 days.
Yeah.
If I can get like one big quick win, or if I'm even lucky, one big and one medium size, then that momentum starts. And again, I've got to go in there and understand the culture, understand how they're thinking, and try to then say, all right, let's look at our next areas that we're going to focus in on and start working there.
Awesome. Am I missing anything? Because I don't want to just as I said, I'm trying to keep these like in that 30 to 45 minute range. So
no, I think we're good.
This is great.
The biggest thing is my approach is vastly different.
Yeah,
so I do switch kind of between consultant and coach, but I come in as a consultant, and I'm there to try to be, I don't even know,
voice of the
their
customer
success as much as possible. Because if I'm talking about the customer experience and making it better as a way to reduce churn, I mean, that's what I need to do with my clients as well. And not only need, that's what I want to do. That's what matters to me.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all. No, I can tell. Like, people won't see the video, but Anita's very passionate about this. I can tell, which is awesome. It's what you want people to come in and not be like putting their cigarette out and be like, okay, what do I need to fix here? Like the wolf or something like that. Like, so that's great. Yeah. So awesome. You know what? I will, when I post this, I'll put the link to your LinkedIn profile. And is that the best place for people to find you? Or
I would say so. Or yeah. You know what? Have them go there. Okay. I think that's easier, because then we can just ask them to connect, say that they, heard me from your show. Yeah. And then I can start a conversation with them.
Awesome. That's great. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll wrap up offline. So thanks very much. And hold on one second. Let me hit the record here. So.